Okay, it's my favorite time of the week. It is Twitter Tuesday here on the Leadersmith podcast. Stay tuned for some real gems. We'll be back in one moment.
In a world of incompetent bosses, micromanagers, and petty tyrants, you are listening to The Leadersmith. Now, here is your host, Darren Gerdes.
Okay, so if you're not familiar with Twitter Tuesday, I go out on Twitter or sometimes Parler, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever, and I'm looking for little quotes that people have posted on particularly on Twitter. That's why we named it Twitter Tuesday, and it rhymes better when it's Twitter Tuesday rather than LinkedIn Tuesday. And so we just look for some little leadership gems. And so I go out and I spend some time isolating these. And once I find them, I just put them into a slide deck for you so I can explain what each of these were and we can just think through them. Okay, so here we go. The first one. This is by Tullio Siragusa, Tullio Siragusa, at Tullio Siragusa. By the way, I also give credit to whoever posted it if I can find the credit to give. Okay, so he posted a quote by Mary Kay Ash. If you don't remember, Mary Kay Ash was pretty well known in the 70s, 80s. She started Mary Kay Cosmetics, and she had a lot of really good ideas. And now the quote's a little dated. She says, "The speed of the leader is the speed of the gang." Okay, just using the word gang sounds a little weird given the context. But what she's saying is essentially what John Maxwell said in his book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, where he talked about the law of the lid. And that is that you never rise higher than the leadership ability of the leader. So whoever's at the top, you never grow beyond that. There's a cap there. So again, the quote is, "The speed of the leader is the speed of the gang." And she's right. I mean, you have to either grow as a leader or find a better leader if you want to grow beyond you. Okay, next one. This is by Action Complete. Action Complete, just follow them on Twitter if you want some leadership wisdom daily showing up in your Twitter feed. They do great stuff every time. Okay, so here's the quote. It's by Anne Frank. "How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world." What a great quote. I mean, so, and that doesn't mean that you have to be the leader to do it. You can be where you are in whatever context you're in, and you can just start improving the world from your little corner of the world and just start making it better around you. And so I think that's just great advice. It's not leadership specific, but I think it's well worth listening to. Again, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. Even if the world's stacked against you, you can improve your little corner. Okay, the next one, from Anne Frank to Dave Barry. I mean, that's kind of a shocking juxtaposition, but here we are. This is Dr. Don McRae posted this at Situational Com. At Situational COMM. Okay, here's the quote. It says, "When trouble arises and things look bad, there's always one individual who perceives a solution and is willing to take command. Very often, that person is crazy." That's Dave Barry. And you're right. I mean, whoever is willing to step in, like most leadership positions, if you think about it, so if let's say you're a vice president at one company and a president's position opens up, very often that president's position opened up because the company's in a tailspin or there's something bad that's gone on. So, okay, sometimes maybe the guy's retired, but usually they'll pull somebody from below. If they're not pulling somebody from below, they have a bad leadership pipeline, and that tells you one thing. And if they are pulling somebody from the outside, what's going on is, hey, we need somebody better than these knuckleheads that we have inside the organization. So you're probably stepping into a not optimal situation. You're probably stepping into some yuck. So when trouble arises and things look bad, there's always one individual who perceives a solution and is willing to take command. Very often that person is crazy. Yeah, they're crazy because they're stepping into a real hard position. The quote also reminded me of a book that I read a number of years ago. It was a fantastic book. It was by Nasser Ghaemi, Ghaemi. It was called A First-Rate Madness. And the basic thesis of the book was that certain leadership types have a propensity to be great leaders in a time of crisis. And he gave examples like, like Lincoln, who was depressed much of the time, but he actually was a very steady hand. Or I think it was Sherman, who was kind of nuts, but he actually was a great combat leader. And he gave a number of examples where somebody that we would have considered, FDR was another example in here, somebody that we would have considered not necessarily the best leader in peacetime is a good example, a good leader in wartime, and vice versa. And it's a fantastic read, because how mentally balanced you are may have something to do with this. And now Dave Barry was saying this tongue in cheek. He's not. He's actually talking about how mentally being not quite right is actually good in leadership. You'll have to read it to understand. Okay, so the next one, this is by Steve Keating. I've found a number of things by Steve Keating posted at Lead Today, that were really well done. He posts a lot of really good things. He said he introduces his quote by saying, "Authentic leaders know when to overlook the mistakes of others." And then the quote itself was, "9/10 of a good attitude consists of overlooking mistakes." And, and I like that one. It's a little different, and so you have to take that with a grain of salt. It's not pure. Like Colin Powell will talk about never overlook an infraction, because that's saying, something about it. But he's not talking about just overlooking infraction. He's just talking about like not hammering people. I think not hammering people for the smallest thing, the letter of the law, but looking to the spirit of it. I think that's where he's going with it. But 9/10 of a good attitude consists of overlooking mistakes is a really interesting thought, and one that I think most leaders would benefit from. Compared to when they micromanage or try to find issues and just stir the pot unnecessarily. Okay, the next one is by Joel Schwartzberg at the Joel Truth. And he says he has this great meme. It's there's two fish bowls. There's one fish bowl with 2, 4, 6, 7 goldfish, and the other one is empty. And the one with 7 goldfish, there's one goldfish leaping out of the bowl into the other one. And it says, "A worker sees a task. A manager sees responsibility. A leader sees opportunity." And don't worry about the details of the task, responsibility, opportunity. Think about just at different levels, you're seeing something very different. So a worker is seeing like what's right in his face. A manager is seeing that same thing, but from a different perspective. And that different perspective is because he's focused on making the thing happen. He's focused on the efficiency of it. He's focused very much on trying to make it work. And a leader is, and maybe the manager and the leader have to be the same person, but let's set aside and make it a different person, is thinking about long-term and change and how to get to the next level. And he's thinking very differently than the manager who's trying to get results immediately, and the leader who's thinking about how to grow people into what comes next. So it's a really interesting reminder to talk about just how we see things differently depending on where we are within the organization, dealing with the very same issues, but how we have to interpret things differently. Okay, the next one is by Anne Salve, S-A-L-V-E, at Anne, A-N-N-E-S-A-L-V-E 1. Okay, and she says this: "I suppose leadership at one time meant muscles, but today it means getting along with people." And that's a quote from Indira Gandhi, and it's a great quote because, yeah, I mean, at one point, I guess if you were just the biggest, baddest person, you're in charge. But right now, that's a terrible model for trying to throw your weight around in order to be in charge. You have to learn how to get along. It's almost the opposite of what maybe it was thousands of years ago when you were the chieftain who had to make sure that you were enforcing your rule and your right. But getting along with people is primarily what leaders have to do, and help people obtain and achieve their objectives. And if it's their objectives, that's a whole different ballgame than when you're trying to get them to achieve your objectives. I've talked at length about that in other places. I'm not going to go on about that in here. That's just me getting up on my soapbox. Okay, let's keep going. The next one, Runa Buis, B-O-U-I-S, at R-U-N-A-B-O-U-I-S. And she quotes this: 80% of your emotions and 50% of your thoughts are not yours. It's a quote by Susanna Redolfs. Redelfs. 80% of your emotions and 50% of your thoughts are not yours. And I was like, wow, that's something really interesting, because it reminded me of a book, The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, and T. Harv Eker wrote that. And Eker said, no thought lives in your head rent free. And I thought, wow, that's a really great quote. No thought lives in your head rent free. That means it's costing you something. Whatever it is that you believe, your beliefs are costing you, or working for you, or whatever, but no thought lives in your head unfree. A very similar kind of thought. Okay, the next one is by Steve Keating, and his introduction to the quote by Brian Tracy that he leaves here is that a leader without integrity is a leader in name only. And look, leaders, you can get away with a lot of things because you're in a position where you might not have as much accountability as an employee. You have lots of people looking over you, right? So, but you don't want to abuse that. If you abuse that, you're in a world of trouble. The quote is by Brian Tracy. It says this: integrity is the most valuable and respected quality of leadership. Always keep your word. Again, if you are in a position where you can violate your integrity, never do. Do everything you can to preserve that integrity, and that will serve you very, very well. Okay, the next one, this is a quote by William Burnell, or sorry, this is a quote by Jesse Lynn Stoner. The person that posted it was William Burnell, at William A. Burnell. He says, the quote is, when you shift from authority-based leadership to collaborative leadership, you will no longer be in control. Truth is, you never were. And I thought, wow, that's great. I mean, what a wonderful quote. That's right. The other day in the leadership community that I started, it's Facebook /groups/learn leadership. I posted something along these lines. I said this: topic of the day: leaders often demand loyalty. Is that good or bad for the leader, for the followers, for the organizations? Discuss. And the long and short of that is that loyalty to the individual is very different than loyalty to the organization. And if you, as the leader, embody the values of the organization, it's very easy to be loyal to you. But let me go back to this quote: when you shift from authority-based leadership to collaborative leadership, you will no longer be in control. The truth is, you never were. And to recognize that you were never actually in control is a big step forward. But this idea that if you just try to hang on to some authority and you're going to tell them how it is, that you're going to be in control, you're not. Or you make yourself kind of look dumb. Okay, and with that, I also want to talk about the author, Jesse Lynn Stoner. I referred to an article in episode 5 of the Leadersmith podcast, The Worst Leadership Quotes and Why You Should Avoid Them. Jesse Lynn Stoner is at what's the name of the center? I can't remember the name, but she's a legit leadership expert, and anything that she writes is worth paying attention to. Okay, the last one that I want to go over with you is this. I just saw this great little video. It's the Prime Minister of New Zealand talking about in this time of COVID, I'm taking a pay cut, and so is my cabinet. We're taking a 20% pay cut. And I thought, wow, that's really remarkable. Okay, so listen to this. I'll show you the little video and see what you think.
Myself, government ministers, and public service chief executives will take a 20% pay cut for the next 6 months, as we acknowledge New Zealanders who are reliant on wage subsidies, taking pay cuts and losing their jobs as a result of COVID-19's global pandemic. We feel acutely the struggle that many New Zealanders are facing, and so too do the people that I work with on a daily basis. And while it in itself won't shift the government's overall fiscal position, it is about leadership. And I acknowledge my colleagues, both in the executive, but also the colleagues we work with in the public service, for the decision that was taken today. If there were ever a time to close the gap between groups of people across New Zealand in different positions, it is now. Of course, many people in our public sector are our frontline essential workers, nurses, police, healthcare professionals. We are not suggesting pay cuts here, and nor would New Zealanders find that appropriate. Rather, I am responsible for the executive branch. Myself and ministers, this is where we can take action, and that is why we have.
Isn't that fascinating? I mean, that's leadership. It's putting money where your mouth is rather than just talking a good game about it. Well, okay, so that's all the time that I have for this episode of the Leadersmith Podcast, Twitter Tuesday. Thanks for your time.